Thank you for joining the Once Changing the World, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Professor Damodaran, who's a distinguished professor in the digital economy, startup and innovation team. Prior to joining ICRIER, which is the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, Damodaran was a senior professor with the economics area at IIM Bangalore. His areas of specializations include application of new generation digital technologies, the economics of the Metaverse and NFTs, architecture of distributed economic systems, blockchain applications for defense sector, IoT models for the food industry, climate and biodiversity financing models based on digital platforms, and sui generis regulations of cryptocurrency, crypto assets, etc. He has authored books such as Encircling the Seamless India, Climate Change and the Global Commons, plus Managing Arts in Times of Pandemics and Beyond. So I want to start with the economics. What would be your views on the key challenges facing India's economy in the aftermath of COVID-19?
First of all, let me thank you for thinking about me for this, for your podcast series. India is in many ways in a very unique position because after COVID, many economies have started facing the brunt in different ways. And if you look at our neighboring countries, they are all in very bad turmoil. And why even neighboring countries? Look at all the developed countries in the world. They themselves have limping from the after effects of COVID. Now, what does it mean by saying after effects of COVID? So what happened during COVID, as everyone knows, the governments had to loosen the purse, and that money had to be given to people who were suffering from COVID, so that their jobs, the jobs that they lost, was compensated for. So it took various forms. In various countries, they went for large-scale stimulus packages, even sending checks home, and then finding that the person who was to receive the check is no longer at the work, that kind of thing. India did not go for that. India went for a more conservative route, though it was criticized at that time that we are indifferent to the issue of COVID. And we did not indulge in too much of deficit financing, fiscal deficits and all that. It was a more responsible fiscal system. And so, of course, like every other country, with big aspirations, India suffered a big setback in 2021. We had a negative growth rate on the GDP. But starting from 2022, last year, we clocked almost 6.8% growth rate in GDP. And looks like by 2024, we'll again be in the range of 6 to 7% growth rate in GDP. So we are really not in a very bad shape compared to many other countries, and our debt is well under control. Now that makes quite a lot of, quite a lot of contribution, because our debt is something like about 87.5% of GDP, which is basically way below debt levels of Japan, United Kingdom, and others. Now, coming to think of which are the vibrant sectors, well, infrastructure is doing pretty well. IT is still doing well, despite the hiccups in the world stage. And the lagging sectors are manufacturing. Manufacturing has to come up, but it is slowly limping back. So those are the challenges, taking up manufacturing and taking the economy up. Inflation is fairly under control. I wouldn't say compared to many other countries in the world, we are not lagging behind. We are not suffering because of high inflation. We do have an inflation problem, but it is still within manageable levels.
Right. Professor, you mentioned about the stimulus package, and globally, I think, different nations had different ways to approach, how do we, deal with the COVID-19 and, empower the people. Like, especially, I think America had, they actually gave out checks. We had a 20 lakh crore package, and the grouse with the common man is that none of the 20 lakh crore package reached the common man. It was largely, it went to the banks and to save these big organizations. What are your views on that?
in any system, there is bound to be leakages. In any system, there is bound to be leakage. It's not that 20,000 crores is meant as a stimulus package and it exactly hits the pockets. It doesn't happen that way. So India also had that problem. There would have been leakages in the system, but we should also see it from a different point of view. I mean, the United States today is in some kind of a crisis. They are facing a big debt crisis, and it's almost to the point of being defaulting on debt. I don't think we have reached that stage. A, and while we have problems with transfers not happening, maybe there have been cases, but we opened a lot of accounts, bank accounts, linked a lot of poor people to the bank accounts. So I would say that in Bharat there would have been leakages, but not to the extent of misdirected.
Environmental economics again happens to be your expertise. Now, UN last year I think released said that we red alerts, and there was a on red alert on climate crisis, and there was a report which I think it was done in 1972, which it's called the limit to growth report, and the report was analyzed on 5 basic development trends, which is the population data, industrialization data, malnutrition data, exploitation of raw materials, and destruction of the living environment. This was modeled in a computer algorithm, and the output was that around 2040, 2050, we are heading towards a climate crisis, global catastrophic event. And then I think in 2020, Gaia Harrington from KPMG took the same report and remodeled with the current present day data. And to the evolutionary algorithm model, and the output again was that 2040 is when we are going towards a global climate catastrophical event because of a constant consumption without conservation. India happens to be having the largest numbers of cities in the most polluted list of global cities. Delhi happens to be the number one for the last couple of years as the most polluted cities in the world. What is India doing when it comes to climate crisis?
See, as far as India is concerned, we have this, as required by the Climate Change Convention reporting systems, we have our nationally determined contributions where we talk about backstopping fossil fuel emissions through a massive green energy program. That's all out there. We are giving a big push to renewable energy and trying to replace fossil fuels at the fastest pace without completely giving up on coal. Right? So we got we were criticized for the formulation in Glasgow that it is phase down, not phase out, and that's partly because we also see that coal as a fossil fuel still has a big macro multiplier effect in terms of livelihoods. Ultimately, it stretches to livelihoods, and in India, in any case, employment situation is not very positive. And if you don't even have the standard energy sources there, then your livelihoods are severely damaged. So India's approach is very clear. We want to replace fossil fuels at a very fast pace, and we have set targets by 2030 to have renewable energy inbuilt in a big way. We have also modernized most of the power plants, thermal power plants, supercritical plants, and we are there. But my point is that while all this is going on, what is the method by which we are adapting to changes in climate? For instance, last year, you would recall, last April, May was the worst summer that we ever had. This year, it is the other way around. It was raining during May, and so climate change is not just about heat; it is also about weather variability. So we have that as a very big problem. Heat is a bigger problem, and if you look at the heat maps, global heat maps, we will find that there are pockets in India which are very vulnerable to temperature rises. Now, that is something which we have to be concerned about. So the way I would see it is, what I would consider to be a better strategy of climate change is to look at microclimate management. Microclimate management, you take Delhi or you take Bangalore or any of these cities, you'll find pockets of where the temperatures are low and and pockets where the temperatures are rising. So you look at micro climate management, a kind of an airshed approach, if you can put it that way, and try to handle this through community-based organizations uh, which are affected by those microclimate plans and have a solution that works out better. Now, this, in essence, what I'm saying is this is consistent with my philosophy of blockchains. Because the blockchain basically says you distribute the problem rather than distribute the resources and rather than centralizing it. Don't even have decentralization, go beyond that and have distribution. So, if I know how to manage my community area, which is facing tremendous heat, and I know that it is partly because the green cover is missing, I am going to take steps to see that those things are restored and done. Here, our mentality is that let the government come forward, let local governments come forward, corporations come, city corporations come forward to help us. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. It has to be distributed approach to climate change. Now, nobody is talking about that language. Now,
Professor, can you elaborate on this? Because you said, because you're using the term of going beyond decentralization and blockchain. So maybe elaborate on this. So everybody understands what you're trying to mean by microclimate management with blockchain.
Yeah. So let me put it this way: I live in a place in Delhi right now where I lived in the past in certain other places. Now I am living in a place which is next to a small park. Right, it's a green spot. I find it definitely a big, not a very big cooling effect, but when I come there, the rigors of heat is less felt in that spot than the other spots where I used to live. That's because the green space has been conserved by the community. And it's a small thing, but many smalls make a very big macro advantage. People think it's small, so why are you talking about this anecdotal stuff? I'm not talking about anecdotal stuff. I'm talking about reality. I feel very comfortable. I don't have to off the AC. So I asked him who maintains this park. It is managed by the community. And every time there is some hit on the tree, if a tree has to be lopped or pollarded, it is opposed by the community. It says no, this is our green space. This is what keeps our temperatures under control. Right? So this is an example of distributed management. Okay. Now look at the way decentralization is. What is centralized management? Basically, a government department which sends its line employees to come and solve the problem. They'll say, oh, there's too much of heat, so we'll try to fix something. It doesn't happen because they don't know what is the demand side situation there. So then the next step is to say local governments can be empowered to do it. So it is called decentralization. Now, decentralization is a much abused word. Decentralization, people think, brings everything. Decentralization implicitly talks about centralization, isn't it? You will only decentralize when you have a centralization problem. So it is like the benign thing, we have centralized it, now we are very kind, we are giving you some powers. I'm talking of distributed management, which I see in my place. Community manages it. They are ensuring that the parks are safe. Corporation comes and does a good job, and the local government has to just facilitate, not manage.
It's the community which needs to take charge, and we need to stop our over dependence on governments or big organizations or some kind of a funding. It's us, the common people, who have got to take a stand and understand that the climate crisis is real. That's the reason UN has declared code red. Now, you mentioned about conserving these green spaces, and it needs to be managed by community. But that also is being eroded because of a capitalistic structure, because there will be some kind of a builder who will understand that in this patch of city, the green patch doesn't make so much commercial sense. Maybe a tower would make a commercial sense. how do we tackle this? Because the greed versus that even the decentralization, I completely understand. I think let's not be too idealistic about blockchain and that it's going to do everything. But maybe talk about this external force called capitalism, and a hierarchical structure, which is top-down hierarchy, and that everything works that way. Banks, or institutions, and everything. Now, decentralization says, it's a bottoms-up approach. How do we get into this world that we're talking about?
See, the problem is that bottom-up approach is held with a lot of suspicion. Why are you going up? You remain where at the bottom, and up is seen as a threat to the state power, right? Now, I will tell you my example. I moved in from Bangalore. Now, Bangalore is a city which has seen real estate flourishing, and most of the lakes have gone by. It was a city of lakes. It is on the crest, right? It's on the crest. Mysore is below, and then you have Bangalore on the crest. And Bangalore is supposed to a sleepy cantonment kind of a town, right? Where people got most of the resources fell within the city, the tanks and lakes and all that. Most of the lakes have been destroyed because of unmitigated urbanization. Now, that is a no-brainer to say that there was urbanization, real estate pressure and all that. It has gone to such a point where the courts had to intervene, the Supreme Court itself had to intervene to ensure that the green belt of Bangalore, it has to be observed. And you can see residential areas coming up on the outskirts of Bannerghatta National Park. So Bangalore is something very unique. It has got a national park, but jutting on the southern side of it, right? It's an elephant trap. So you have houses coming very nearby, and the advertisement is very clear. You can see it, get a good view when you get up in the morning, have a cup of tea. You have seen the advertisement, right? And then you look at Bannerghatta National Park and you can enjoy it. But at what cost? So I think the problem starts with those advertisements. Right? You can see a lake and then you destroy the lake. It is well known for that. So the greed of capitalism comes partly because there is no resistance, a consumer aversion, even if it is not articulated. A consumer cynicism should be there for capitalism to take a hit. Otherwise, they don't care. You can put in advertisements and you can go and buy it. I myself have bought an apartment, but I didn't look for Bannerghatta National Park because something in me said that, that's not a good idea to buy it because I need a place to live. But Bannerghatta National Park, it is good to go and see once in a while, subject to the regulations. So I think it is a kind of aversion and a cynicism on the part of the ordinary person, the citizen, that will blunt the edge of capitalism. Otherwise, capitalism will merrily go. Here, we all want to be part of the rise. I want to see Bannerghatta National Park in the morning. I would like to see an elephant and shoot a picture, put it up on Facebook, right, or Instagram. Right. And I take a lot of pleasure in that. Right. I think cynicism is not there because every citizen, as Bernard Shaw said, wants to be part of that deal. Wants to enjoy that unsustainability, though they all talk about sustainability. That would include people like me as well. But I am sufficiently cynical now. So I'm telling the countervailing power to rampant capitalism is cynical. And that cynicism translates to consumer resistance. Protests don't, because protests are put down. Ways of protecting. So,
Professor, you've been deeply vested in blockchain, cryptocurrency, crypto assets. Now, the Indian government obviously has put some taxes, and there has been a reverse migration of sorts, of these blockchain Web 3.0 startups moving to greener pastures such as Dubai and Singapore. Do you think blockchain Web 3.0 is going to play a significant role in businesses here in India, business and possibly government? B, do you think that there could ever be a day when fiat currency would be replaced by cryptocurrency?
To answer your question, I am sufficiently enamored of Austrian school. Austrian school of von Mises and Hayek. They are the forefathers of this cryptocurrency movement. So I don't think Satoshi Nakamoto would have read. He does not exist in the first place. Even if he existed, would he have read Mises? I don't think so. But the idea was very simple. Every person can have his own currency, right? The currency which gets accepted is the currency the most credible person has. I mean, in essence, I'm putting it poetically. So I find that it does not work in practice. Because we had many currencies way back in 19th century, 17th century, 18th century. There was no Federal Reserve in the US till about 20th century, beginning of 20th century. There are bucket shops which are producing currency, checks and check systems, and banks were running that. But that has become so sufficiently strong and centralized that the hope of cryptocurrency replacing fiat currencies won't happen in the near future, at least 20 to 25 years from now. And that's partly because of this, it is political. There's a political economy in fiat currency. It is not that, it is something, it's a good technical instrument, so let us do it. It doesn't happen that. But having said that, I have a lot of faith in crypto assets. That remains undiminished. I still feel tokens are very important. Because again, tokenization is an idea which came from Boston School. Tokenization is a good idea because what is tokenization? You reduce services to a token, right? And if you hold the token, you have a right to assurance. You have a right to good service. It's an entitlement. If you have cash with you, you're not sure whether that service will come to you. So that is the way forward as far as I am concerned. And decentralized organizations, I talk about park management and others. They will all be run by tokens. The tokens will incentivize you. Small tokens it doesn't threaten the fiat currency. And at the same time, it works for providing local services. So that is my philosophy for it. Now, coming to your other question, yes, India has seen Web3 startups. Very interesting startups have come out. If you look out, there are alternatives to Uber, there are alternatives to a lot of technologies which are coming in Web3 space, which protect your personal data without being, you don't snoop into somebody's personal data. So those are the things which are coming up in the Web3 space. And as far as Metaverse is concerned, education is just taking over. We are creating virtual MBAs. Companies are coming forward to give MBAs, which are much more immersive and experiential rather than typical classroom pedagogy. So there is a lot of things happening. The problem is Web3. Web 3.0 is one thing, Web 3 is different. I've been writing on that. Web 3 is radical because it is blockchain and crypto driven. Now that will meet with some resistance. But if that cryptocurrency angle is taken out, it remains a very promising technology because you are distributing the product. You are going for distributed ownership, local tokens, they will service the whole thing. So local services get paid for, settled at the local level rather than getting centralized. So those are the good things that I see.
Exciting times, Professor, right? You mentioned out, I mean, there are alternates of these Web3 startups for Uber, alternates for Zoom, and which does it in a much beautiful distributed way without encroaching on users' data or manipulating users' data. So exciting part, but I'm just going to probe that this thing further of the cryptocurrency replacing fiat. You said it could take like maybe around 20-25 years, and you mentioned that it's because the power of the state power will never allow for something like this to happen. But what at least I'm seeing from my perspective is that the power of state is waning. Earlier like powers of big banks and institutes are waning. It's the big tech which is becoming more powerful, and it's not just that, it's the technology is becoming stronger than the technologist. What I'm trying to say is that there are technologies such as artificial intelligence which is becoming self-improving, and eventually it's on the pathway to artificial general intelligence. Even with the narrow intelligence, we have something called this chat GPT-4, which kind of is disrupting all possible in industries, and there are lots of industries which are getting automated, and once things get automated, we might get into the pathway of UBI, universal basic income. So you mentioned about blockchain and metaverse. So maybe can you elaborate on the digital economy, like the metaverse? We are being pushed into this virtual world, though it's very, very rudimentary at this point in time. You mentioned about MBAs for metaverse, and could you elaborate on this? What could be the opportunity once this technology, this metaverse, becomes more widespread and it converges with AI and blockchain, other tech stack?
Yes, it's a very loaded question. Before I get into it, let me clarify. I said 20 years of mismanagement of fiat currency for it to be replaced by cryptocurrency. So unless you're really going to mismanage fiat currency, there are some signs of it right now, but if that prolongs, then that's what I meant. I didn't have, why 20 years? Because that's complete, it's just a random number that I want to give the length of time that it will take for that to happen. Anyway, coming back to the point, the most interesting aspect of what you said is that nation states and governments are losing power to corporations, and that is happening in the US. It is happening in India. It is happening in every part. Corporates are becoming more important than, and they have world ambitions also. They want to be the next authorities, right? But my point is something different. Now, given that reality, where do you find metaverse and blockchains and all that? These are led by the very same companies which centralize the internet, right? Internet has been centralized by 3 or 4 companies. That is why Web3 has come about. The first 2 webs were also highly centralized. Now Web3 is supposed to decentralize. They say decentralized, I'm against it. I saw distributed, that kind of a thing. So the way I see it is, to answer your question, Metaverse will be there, maybe with or without blockchains. It will have 2 variants of that. And you will find some cryptocurrency also getting settled and traded. And the corporations will also have their versions of Metaverse. The distributed communities are also aspiring to have their own, versions of Metaverse and Web3. So it is a very complex world. And because of the pulls and counter pulls, the existing system will last for a longer time than you think.
So, Professor, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. My last question is that, these complicated dynamics which is being played out, the metaverse, Web3, generative AI, which is doing text to image, text to video, and so on and so forth. In this scenario, what is the future of education? Or, how it's going to look like, and maybe, possibly also give a synopsis of your book, the new book, Managing Arts in Times of Pandemics and Beyond.
Well, I didn't touch upon AI at all. In fact, I forgot to do that. ChatGPT-4 is a big threat to the existing education system, teaching and learning systems. Now, ChatGPT-4 is a threat because it really raises the risk of completely overturning the existing pedagogy. So if you notice, a lot of schools in India are opposed to that because children are relying on ChatGPT for their homework. So now the resistance is, we'll ban ChatGPT, right? You see the parallel in crypto also. We'll ban it. And then slowly they're saying, no, we'll change the homework pattern. We'll not allow carry home exams anymore. So that's another response, right? We'll have the traditional paper and pen exam. So this is the pressure. But yet, I do find some people, some institutions, educational institutions, saying that let us change the way of examining students. Why do we even have to give homework and make them write? Because then ChatGPT steps in. Give them something experiential. Create a craft. Stand there and create it yourself. Do it yourself. So what I'm saying is that kind of a trend will take over. So it will, over a period of 5 to 6 years, you will find ChatGPT, people will be only seeing it as a knowledge enhancer. But the more education will be gravitating towards more hands-on approaches. Hands-on approaches maybe in the metaverse also. In metaverse, you can do is I want to create a new engine. I can create it in the metaverse and show to people I'm worth being employed, right? But you're a company, and you can even do fancy ideas in metaverse because it's the idea of digital twin. You can create a digital and then say that you give me some money for doing it. The same thing in the real world. So all these possibilities are there. So Chat GPT, yes, it's a big threat. It's a big threat in the sense that it gives you answers for questions. If you are asking ordinary questions, uh, you are going to be finished as a teacher. You have to answer. You have to get more tough. You have to not talk about engines and carburetors in the class or draw a diagram. You'll say you create an engine in the class. So we may get, because of Chat GPT, we may get a different genre of students who come who are practitioners. So that's how I see. So AI has its limits. There's a big debate going on whether it should stop now or it should go beyond that. I'm not wanting to get into this effect, but it will have a big effect in the world of arts. Now I'm coming to my book on arts. It talks about technology. My book was written during the between 2021 and 2022, and I was documenting exactly what was happening in different museums and performing arts theaters during those difficult days. And I proceed to discuss about the implications of those things that I observe in terms of economic theories and management theories and all that. So that is a summary of my book. So what I try to do is I examine two things. I looked at museums. I also looked at performing arts theaters. I didn't get into crafts, and I also looked at cultural policies of 5 countries, including India, Canada, United States, Russia, and one more, and Japan. So I looked at these countries, and then I related it to what was happening in the pandemic period. So most of the well-to-do, well-endowed museums like Guggenheim and MoMA, Metropolitan Museum of Arts, they all went for VR and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality in a big way. And the Art Basel, which is supposed to be one of the leading art festivals in the world, they shifted to augmented reality. No, sorry, they shifted to virtual reality. And also they provided a 360-degree view of what was happening in the galleries and a three-dimensional 360-degree view. So I could sit at home and sort of buy things in the art fair. Whereas in good old days, it was not a democratized thing because art fairs were, where the rich went. They were naturally getting an access to their places. And the person explaining what the product is spends more time looking at, after he's convinced that this person carries a good wallet, strong wallet. Here, you could see it from the screen. Anyone can appreciate the art product. And maybe he's even a person who thinks it is unaffordable also gets to see the art fair in far greater detail. Now, what has happened to performing arts theatre? There's a micro performing arts theatre in Kerala, performing Kudiyatam. I know that person for a very long years, 20 years. I've seen this artist grow into a very big artist. So, what did he do during the COVID time? He went for Facebook Live at that point, and he streamed it. He streamed all his performances. And when he streamed the performances, he got two sources of revenue. People were voluntarily donating to him, and he had a bank account to which it was transferred. There was no blockchain or cryptocurrency or anything. This was a big boom. He started complaining about, government grants are not coming on time and all that because he was not bothered. Even today, I don't think see him complaining much because he has his Facebook Live running in the evenings. So that is supposed to have been the big thing that pandemics did. That is, small theaters suddenly found their feet, small galleries suddenly found their feet, especially those who took up technologies, and they were empowered. That is the point. Till then, I used to think that digital technology is all for the rich. No, I found that it is not. It is also digital technologies have benefited the small to small artists. Now, and they are not decentralized or distributed yet. They got two revenue streams which keeps them going. Right? So those are some of the findings. I've also looked at some of the large theaters. I've looked at small theaters, Mariinsky, for instance, in Russia. It's a fabulous ballet theater. Then Guggenheim in the US, as far as a museum is concerned, our own Victoria Memorial Hall in Kolkata. But Indian museums and galleries did not embrace digital technologies to that extent. But India's small-time performing arts theaters, they embraced it and got wonderful results. So these are some of the findings. And just as I was about to finish the book and send it to the library, Mark Zuckerberg announces that he is going for Meta. So I put it as a postscript and said what Metaverse is. And that is how I ended. Now, how do I see Metaverse? We have government of one thing about India is we have declared virtual museums. And some of our leading museums, a national museum is a virtual museum as well. So that has that sense of reachability, which we have seen by treating it as an elementary virtual museum, can be seen. A lot of people get into, many people get into national museums and, national museum virtual, they do the virtual tours and come to someone in a good knowledge base on what is happening, what are the artifacts assembled, what is the history and all that. So those interesting things are happening even without the metaverse. Now with metaverse, you are having your own avatar. You can create your own digital version, and you will be going and I've been looking at Da Vinci's painting, and you can be even drawing something on the top of it. It doesn't matter because you're not ruining anything, right? So that is the kind of thing. Now, what generative arts does, AI does, is something even more, radical. It takes something from Da Vinci and it will put Da Vinci and Raphael together and create a new image altogether, which is absolutely bizarre. So that is can be bizarre for a lot of people. For some people, it will be very interesting arts, right? And there is a controversy whether we should have this kind of nonsense going on. Human agency creates things; they are creative, but why is this machine coming and creating things? Machine is not an agency, and machines are not robots. Have not become singular in the sense that general intelligence they have not got. They have still not developed their own egos. But I am an artist. I'm also an artist in my own right. So that is meeting with mixed responses. But I find that Metropolitan Museum of Modern Arts has got a system of using AI. Got a system of using AI for recurating their collections. So that is something which is absolutely fascinating because they are discovering their wealth much better through AI than they thought they would. But where the problem will come? The problem will come when the AI starts redrawing the MoMA's architecture itself and saying this is lousy, so let me redo it. Now that is going to be a problem. So there are areas where AI gets it, which has not been touched by human beings, and which is acceptable to which meets the needs of the human beings, it will be accepted. But when it goes out of control and starts doing things which we accept as moral standards, that is where it will have a problem. And in arts, it is bound to happen because you can, you have no concern about moral rights and other things which lawyers talk about, right? There is nothing in how can you tell the machine what is a moral right? So the machine will come out with things which are absolutely bizarre.
Right. Professor, really, really appreciate you taking time, being part of the podcast, sharing your insights. And this to the last question, you spoke about the education and how things like, a large language model such as ChatGPT-4 is perceived as a threat. And I hope that the mindset changes and we perceive it as a partner rather than a threat to these technologies. Even how we were looking at banning these technologies, possibly understanding it better so that we incorporate it better for human need rather than just personal greed. Because I guess technologies get pushed out or pushed away is because a certain capitalistic structure or certain entrepreneur chooses to maximize profit by manipulating the consumer rather than enabling the consumer. So I hope that we kind of change, because I think there's some solid dynamics which is being played out, in the online digital economy, where that education also is going from traditional to, these massively open online education MOOCs, which is pretty much free for, and it kind of democratizes education. And you mentioned about how your book talks about how performing artists are being empowered by enabling the use of technology. And I don't think it's only performing arts. I think because of COVID, I think it's touched all businesses. I think in the next maybe decade or so, all businesses, all institutions will have a certain layer of tech. So I think instead of pushing these tech stack away, we need to partner it and leverage. But yes, when does this tech become or gets general purpose intelligence like human beings? That's when I think maybe the complications will arise. But exciting as well as scary times. Any last notes that you would want to leave our audience with?
Well, I should say that I'm looking forward to some exciting times with teaching. IIM Bangalore has a very ambitious MOOCs program. It's well known, actually, internationally. It has its own platform, IIMBX, and it also has hitched its platform to edX, which is a Harvard MIT platform. I have 2 courses running in that. And, I should tell you that one is on arts, one is on IPRs. So my experience with MOOCs is learn to talk to the wall, then you are a very effective teacher in MOOCs. You don't see anyone. Whereas a standard teacher is used to seeing students, how they emote and how they react and all that. Here you're just talking to a wall. And if you learn that art, then you'll be good. The only problem is after that, when you switch over to the real classroom, you should not be talking to the wall again. You have to be fairly interactive. So this is exactly the difference. MOOCs, unfortunately, is one-sided, though it has great prospects. The reachability is amazing, but you are an actor. You're shooting for a film, and you don't get to see the audience, right? So actors go and sit and watch their own screen. How is the audience reacting? But Metaverse has this promise of getting that reaction not through you, but maybe a better version of you, because it all depends on what dress you are wearing, and you look even better because you are designing as per your taste. Students also come there, you talk, and then you start relaxing the discipline of an educational institution, see how creativity springs up. So I think I'm looking for converting my elective course into a metaverse. I have an elective course which I used to run in IIMB. It is called Global Cons Negotiations. It used to be a fairly well subscribed course. So when I was leaving IIMB, students did ask for it. The course will be with us and you can see it in metaverse. So basically, I think metaverse is all about you can see it yourself, how you are performing as a detached view while you are performing, right? That simultaneity. And that is something which is the next and most exciting stage in education. And I'm not saying that everything about metaverse will be fine, but it also has its abuses, law and order problems and moral issues and all that. But it promises a new era of teaching as well as pedagogy as well as learning. So this on this note, I think I would like to conclude.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate you taking time being part of the podcast. And you rightfully pointed out, I think with the metaverse, you won't be just speaking to the walls like you do in MOOCs. You'll actually be seeing these holographic images of your students all around. And these students would not just be restricted to a specific geographic location. They'll be spread all around the world, and instead of just maybe one or two, it could be hundreds and thousands of students from all around the world. So, in that note, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. To my listeners, if you like what you're seeing in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I really appreciate this.